everyone joining us from around the world. Welcome to Spark Shift Succeed, proudly presented by Unique Speaker Bureau International in collaboration with An Even Better Place to Work. I am Mel Tsodetse, and today's session comes at a time when organizations everywhere are facing a hard truth. You cannot build high-performance organizations with disconnected people. Too many workplaces are filled with silos, burnout, internal competition, and leaders trying to drive performance without building belonging. And yet the organizations that are truly thriving today are not the ones with the loudest strategies. They are the ones that have mastered human connection, collaboration, and shared purpose. That is why today's conversation is so critical. Our speaker today, Dr. Alfred Chidembo, has built his message and leadership around exactly this principle. From humble beginnings in rural Zimbabwe to becoming an internationally recognized speaker, leadership coach, and advocate for Ubuntu leadership, Alfred's story is a powerful reminder that transformation happens when people rise together. In today's session, The Circle of Abundance, all for one, he will challenge us to rethink how we lead, how we work, and how we create environments where success is shared. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the incredible Dr. Alfred. Alfred, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that very energetic introduction, Melissa. You called me the incredible Dr. Alfred Chidembo, and that's something that I'll put in my back pocket every day and remember. Thank you so much for that. So today I'm going to talk to you about the circle of abundance, all for one. I'm going to start by telling you a story. You know, I remember my first day of primary school, and I was 6 years old in a small village in Zimbabwe. And I remember walking barefoot with my brothers, and we were probably the happiest kids you could find around. We were just excited by the fact that we were going to school. But the winter months were really, really hard for me, because walking barefoot on the gravel in winter for a 6-year-old is not easy. It's very uncomfortable. But I remember getting to school and learning how to write my name in the sand. That was my first experience of school. And we had a teacher who stood in front of us, and he read the books, and we thought, oh my goodness, this guy is so knowledgeable. And we only had that one book. But my life changed the following year when I was 7 years old. My dad moved us to the city, and he'd been taking all of us, his kids, one by one, to the city to get a better education. And it was my turn, myself and my older brother, who's only 2 years older than me, out of it, 6 siblings. So we got to Masvingo, and my dad said to me, you know what, young man, you don't know how to read as well as the city kids. Here's 50 cents, you go into the library. Read as much as you can so that you can build your vocabulary. And that was the beginning of my journey with books. And I remember walking into the library for the first time, and I could not believe these library shelves stacked with books, so many titles on them. And I thought, wow, this is great. So I got straight into it, and I started reading, discovering the joy of, solving mysteries with the Hardy Boys. We went to South America. We solved mysteries of the Aztec warrior. We went to the countryside of England with the famous five. We had picnics with the famous five, and we solved mysteries, and we had so much fun. And I remember going on other adventures with the Three Musketeers. And that's how I called them, the Three Musketeers, because my vocabulary wasn't so good. Only to realize later on that they actually called the Three Musketeers. And for me, the Three Musketeers were my heroes. Because at that time in the 80s, there was actually a show on TV called D'Artagnan and the Three Muskehounds. Now, D'Artagnan and the Three Muskehounds was actually a series which was adapted, a Spanish and Japanese animation where the heroes were dogs, not humans. And I thought that was really fascinating. It was incredibly popular around the 80s. Now, that TV series was so impactful that even in the 80s, they actually won an award at the International Film Festival in New York. And I remember D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers, whenever they went out on a quest, And whenever they fought with, with rivals and whoever it is that they had to fight with, they would come together and they would shout, one for all and all for one. Wow. And at the center of that story, this phrase here just stayed with me even long after the television was switched off. But as an adult, working with teams, working with leaders, I now realize that it actually just wasn't, a rallying war cry for D'Artagnan and the Muskehounds. Because what does it mean when we say one for all and all for one? It means that we rise together. It means we look out for each other. It means that we do not leave people behind. When one of us is struggling, we all stop, we go back, we pick them up, and we take them along. We understand that individual success means very little if the collective is struggling. And interestingly, that same philosophy from D'Artagnan and the Three Muskehounds is similar to what Ubuntu says. I am because you are because I am. Now, both ideas find their place even in the workplace today. Believe it or not, they actually do. Because in the workplace, we have a danger of forgetting what it means to be truly human again. These are the workplaces where people are beginning to feel disconnected and so far away from each other. Yet we use words like we need to collaborate together, high-performing teams. First of all, we need to be a team before we are high-performing teams. We need to know each other, to get to know each other, to build a relationship before we can even collaborate. And when that connection begins to die, you know what? It feels like your culture is decaying. And that decay doesn't happen loudly. It's silent. And it's internal. At first, you don't realize it because living organisms, when they decay, they begin to decay slowly, quietly and internally. And you can feel it before you can explain it because the odor just stands out. You just pick it up and you know that something here is off. The energy just changes. Just in those places, trust weakens and people begin to withdraw. Meetings begin to lose life because people just show up and they're just part of the meeting, but they're not contributing. Collaboration becomes mechanical. We throw that word around, but people don't actually collaborate to get the results that they want. And eventually, the culture begins to smell. And that smell is emotionally rotten. So people may not know exactly what is wrong, but they know something is off. And this is why I want to show you these figures right now before we proceed. Look at this. These are the statistics from the Gallup State of the Global Workplace. It says only 19% of people are engaged in your workplace, in your teams. If you lead a team, if you're part of a team, you know that only one person out of 5 is engaged. And that statistic is actually scary. Now, if you flip it the other way around, you realize that 63% of people are not engaged at all. So if you're in a team, you might want to start looking around and think who's engaged and who's not. And that's a very interesting statistic because that 63% who are not engaged, sometimes you just lose them completely and they're gone. But the one that scares me is the 18% who are actively disengaged. And what this means is that these are the 18%, the one person, or close to 20%, it's the 1 out of 5. That person who shows off, who's just very disruptive, they show up to the meetings, they're very negative, they're complaining all the time, and they're toxic. And that is scary because you know what? If you look at the same report from Gallup, it actually shows that workplaces worldwide lose in approximately $8 trillion due to loss of productivity. And that comes from that 18% who are toxic in the environment. They're affecting your culture. And then productivity begins to drop. So I want to talk to you about the circle of abundance. All for one, as the Three Muskehounds said. One for all and all for one. Some of you may think, well, this sounds good. Yes, all for one, working together. Ubuntu, I am because you are because I am. You could say, well, it sounds good, but my workplace is too far gone. Now I'll tell you this. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for us to step back, to ponder the past in the present so that we can design the future that we want. Because at the end of the day, this is our culture. Well, others would say, well, this sounds soft. We still have targets to deliver. But who are we delivering these targets with? Who are we delivering these targets for? The people that we are delivering these targets with are looking for something far much more than just the numbers. They are looking for belonging. They are looking to be valued. They are looking to feel that they're important, that they've got a voice. They want to be part of the team so that they can also add on to the wins, so that we can all meet those targets together. Oh, and others would say, well, I'm exhausted myself, especially with managers. Again, if you look at the Gallup report, which was released just 2 months ago, it shows that managers are overwhelmed at the moment. And rightfully so, because the world around us is changing. Some would say, what if I try to reconnect and people reject it? Well, there's always that fear, isn't it? The fear that what if I try something and it falls flat? But does that mean that we stop trying? Do we stop trying to bring our people along just because we're afraid that people might reject it? Or do we go back and redesign or co-design solutions together as a team so that we get to exactly where we want to be? Others would say, well, we keep talking about culture, but nothing ever changes. Ooh, I hear that quite a lot. We talk about culture, but nothing ever changes. But I want to push back on that because culture is not owned by one person. We are all responsible for building the culture that we want, designing the culture that works for us. So that's my challenge for you today. So this is the work that I've been doing. I hadn't introduced myself, but I just want you guys to get a glimpse into my world, why I speak about these things, why I'm passionate about people, why I'm passionate about culture. So that little boy who came from the village, 30-something years later, got a PhD in electrochemistry from the University of Wollongong in Australia. I'd gone through the University of Pretoria at Tux. And one of my supervisors, actually my supervisor, asked me to publish an article that turned out to be in one of the highest ranking journals in the world. And then after that, I got into public speaking, started a charity, rescuing books from Australian landfills and setting up libraries in rural Zimbabwe. To date, we've set up over 38 libraries and built 4 brick by brick, and I'm really proud of that work. And I stepped onto the TEDx stage in 2021 and spoke about this story, how we started collecting books that were destined for landfill in a country where we sent 5 million books to landfill every year, turning that trash into treasure for kids in disadvantaged communities and giving them an opportunity to read. Because I was that kid at some point. And I'm really passionate about that because I realize that if I succeed, then my community should also succeed. My joy becomes their joy. My success becomes their success. And I take that into the coaching that I do, designing workshops for teams, leading with that philosophy to say your success is my success. So in my last job where I worked with a team for 2 years, we realized that we needed to turn some numbers around because engagement was beginning to decline. And after 2 years of hard work of building the culture, we noticed that certain figures went up that really I was really proud of because it showed that something had shifted. 6% of the staff reported that I received the respect I deserve from my colleagues at work. 13% said that, hey, you know what? I want to stay working in my position for at least the next 3 years. Here we were solving the retention problem. And 23%, there was a 23% increase in people who said, hey, my agency inspires me to come up with new or better ways of doing things. This pointed to innovation. And again, I want to come back to the circle of abundance because that's what it was all about. It was the little things that we did during that time, which you can also take, put in your back pocket right now and begin to implement in your teams. because we realize that the decline of engagement starts with the first thing that people experience when they come into a team. At some point, as long as you're part of a team, you're going to get disappointed. You can't run away from that. Here, an expectation gap emerges. Somebody's disappointed, they go back home, they tell their family about it, and emotionally they're deflated. But what you want to do in a space like this is introduce coaching straight away. Get a coach. Help them get a coach. Then from disappointment, you move to disillusionment. Now, this stage here is really sad because you see people trying. They're grappling with their reality, what's happening in the workplace. They think it's their problems. They think it's me. They want to work harder. They want to put more effort. They overcompensate, but the doubt creeps in. And it's emotionally exhausting. And while they're looking for encouragement doesn't come to them. No one offers a word of encouragement. So they struggle with this on their own. So they begin to disengage. These are the people who show up in the workplace, shoulders drop. They sit in meetings and they're very quiet. Especially now when we work with dispersed teams, it's easy for somebody to switch off their camera. You can't even see the emotions in their faces. You don't even know how they're doing. They've checked out. Individually, or emotionally, I mean, they've just withdrawn. They contribute minimally. They sit there quietly. They say, hey, I don't want to rock the boat. And it's their problem, not my problem. And what you want to do in a space like this is just to empathize with such people. Just being curious and listening, actively listening, finding out what exactly is going on in those spaces. And the last stage is departure. This is where somebody says, you know what, I've had enough. I'm out. So they resign formally. And again, here they miss one thing. The narrative for them is, you know what, no one ever noticed me. No one valued me. And I'm going to a place where people will probably value me more. Now, here's the fascinating thing about what I've just picked up in the past few months. People are actually not departing anymore. They're staying. They're actively disengaged. These are the guys who just show up because they have their needs. They have things that they need to pay for. They've got a mortgage to pay for. So they just do the bare minimum and just stay in the team. They are the ones who are planning a 10-month holiday away from their workplace using work hours. But they are not departing because they realize that the workplace, the work, and the organization is paying for something that they need, but they cannot afford to walk away completely. And this is where our productivity begins to decline. Now, whenever I go back to the village, I'm fascinated by this. You know, whether it's a time to plant, time to harvest, or, you know, whatever it is that's happening at that time in the village, people never work alone. And I find this really fascinating. The whole community comes together somehow. They go to a person's field and they never do work on their own. They never expect to get paid for it. But they realize that if one of them is not successful, if one of them does not manage to get a good yield in their fields, the whole village suffers. So they work together to help each other. And so people show up, they do the work, they bring their energy, they bring their hands, they bring their time, they bring their presence. And in these spaces, they have carried conversations. It's psychologically safe spaces where they have conversations. They plan the future of their village, the future of their children. And sometimes you even find women, as you can see in that picture, you find women carrying babies on their backs, working beside elders, working beside their neighbors, working beside the younger ones. Everyone contributes what they can. And nobody says, well, this is not my role. Now, this is not my problem. No one ever says, well, this is not my responsibility. Because the community understands that we move forward together, never alone. We always move forward together as a collective. And I sometimes wonder, what would happen if workplaces were designed or operated in such a way? What would happen in your team if you operated in that way? If you were to look back and realize that there's somebody whom we've left behind in their role is actually way, way behind, and you take time to go back and to help them so that they can catch up. Imagine what that would look like. Imagine if we were to walk into our meetings and we ask the important questions. Who needs help? Who amongst us needs help? Imagine if we started asking, who is struggling silently? Who in our team is struggling silently? Who have we left behind? Is there somebody that we've left behind, and how do we move forward together? Because the strongest teams, they are never built on individual brilliance alone. Yeah, you look at any team that you want, whether it's a sports team, uh, different codes. Success is never built by individual brilliance. It's always a collective effort. And that is what collaboration really looks like. It's not the endless meetings that we have where we're sitting there for hours planning what needs to be done. It's not copying everyone in every email. No, it's actually just not working. I've noticed this. I want to come back to this. Have you noticed that there are people who walk into the office with their headphones on? They don't talk to anyone the whole day. And then at 5 o'clock, they pack their bags and they leave. They haven't talked to anyone. Yet during that time, while they're at work, they have actually laughed digitally. So they've gone on Teams and said, laugh out loud, or they've put out an emoticon where somebody is actually laughing, but it's an open plan office. You don't even hear them laughing. But then we say, it's as if we are performing laughter, we are performing connection, we are performing collaboration, but not actually experiencing it. Because real collaboration is when people feel responsible for each other's success. So when there's confusion, when there are silos, when people begin to blame each other, when there's competition and there's a lack of trust, the work becomes heavier. So you can imagine, just looking at that picture, imagine if those people stop trusting each other. If they said, you know what, I'm just going to do my part and go home and that's it. Imagine if they started to blame each other or they started to compete. Imagine what would happen. Because I think this is what we are missing in the workplace. It's not the talent that we're missing. We do have the talent. It's not another strategy that we need. No, it's not more systems that we need to implement. No, but it's a deeper understanding of a shared responsibility. What it means when we come together to do this work to achieve a certain goal as a collective. Knowing that when one person struggles, we notice them. When one person succeeds, we share in their joy, in their success. And when one person falls behind, well, the team reaches back. We all stop, we pause, we reach back, and we say one for all and all for one. Now, this is how it looks in real life. Daily pit stops. Now, if you look at a Formula One car or a Formula One team in the pit stop, what stands out immediately is that it's a team of people and nobody's working independently, right? Because every person is connected to someone else's role. You're connected to the guy who's changing the tires, the guy who's, stabilizing the car, the guy who is monitoring the timing, the guy who releases the vehicle. And while they're all working together, from the outside, it looks like, oh, this is all speed, right? But it's actually not. What it is actually trust, it's coordination, it's communication, it's repetition underneath all of that. It's teamwork. Because no single individual can pull those tasks alone. You actually just need everyone else to perform. And this is how you build high performance in teams. Because it's not an individual act. High performance is a collective act. So what we did in our team is that we realized that we were more disconnected than ever before in an environment that was constantly changing. I introduced the 5-minute check-ins. And there was no agenda here. No agenda, No calendar invites, just simple calls with those who were virtual, who were online, simple calls to just check up on people and say, hey, how are you doing today? How are you feeling about that project that you're working on? Being curious, but stepping back to also listen to what people were saying. So in a team of 120, all I did was just create a spreadsheet with everyone's names on it, and I'd tick them off if I had 5-minute conversations with them. And what fascinated me the most is that there were people who actually needed more than 5 minutes. So they were happy to carry on for another 20 minutes, for another 25 minutes, because they realized that this was a time where they could openly share where they were. But in understanding where they were, it meant that we could design culture initiatives that spoke to the people. And that's how come we had those numbers that I showed earlier on. Increases in engagement, an increase in innovation because people felt seen, people felt valued. They felt that somebody cared in the workplace.
Alfred?
Now, what? Yes.
Sorry, we do need to wrap up a little bit so that we can ask you some questions.
Ah, fantastic. Yeah. Not a problem, Kathy. I was in the zone right there, but I'll just share this last story here.
Okay.
So how I've seen this work in a team so well is with the Boston Celtics from 2008. The Boston Celtics had gone for 21 years without winning the NBA championship. Doc Rivers, the coach, had come in, and you know what he did? He traded 5 of his players and brought in these big 3 guys. The big 3, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen. Oh, big egos. You know, Kevin Garnett was coming from the Timberwolves. He was the big guy. Ray Allen coming from, I forgot which team it was. But these guys had big egos. They had to drop their egos. They had to sacrifice something. And what Doc Rivers did was he talked to the rookies. He came up with a strategy so that the rookies taught them about Ubuntu because he had heard somebody talk about Ubuntu. They implemented Ubuntu in their team, starting with the rookies, starting with the younger people who had so much energy and were enthusiastic about the philosophy, who believed in it. They spread it across the whole franchise. And guess what? After 21 years, the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship. And this is what it looks like in practice. When we adopt these philosophies that shift our focus from me as an individual to us as a team, us as a collective, us as an organization, so that we can serve our stakeholders the way that we want to and the way that we need to. So, in closing, you know, maybe the problem in many workplaces today is not that people have stopped working. Nah. Maybe people have stopped hoping. Maybe people have stopped trying. And when people feel valued, when people feel seen, when people feel trusted, and they feel part of something so meaningful, that's where the powerful shift happens. So, high-performing teams are built by people who remember the 3 Maskehans motto, all for one and one for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alfred, for such a thought-provoking and deeply relevant conversation. I love your work, the passion behind your voice, the mantra of your success is my success. Ubuntu is really what it is. So thank you, Doc, for your impact. And back to what you said we rise together, we look out for each other. And when connection begins to die, the culture decays. I do think that challenges us to rethink what abundance truly means in the workplace. Not abundance as individual achievement alone, but abundance as the collective success created when people feel connected, included, and empowered to contribute. And I think one of the most powerful takeaways from today is that collaboration is no longer optional. It is a leadership responsibility. Now, I won't be stingy. I'll go into the chat. I do have a question from Paula. Paula says, how do you get leaders to see the value and importance of investing in their people when the leader is the bottleneck themselves?
I love that. I just had a conversation with somebody just on Friday. We were talking about exactly the same thing, and they asked me this question and said, hey, how do I then talk to my leaders to make them realize that this is where we are suffering as a collective? And I thought, wow, this is interesting. because the leaders are the ones who are supposed to be looking at this, coming from the balcony onto the dance floor, really feeling the energy to say, well, our people are struggling. And what that looks like is really coming together as a team. As a team, bringing the leaders in and talking to them collectively and saying, hey, this is where we are. We are struggling. Because if only one person goes up there, there's that fear of being targeted. There's that fear that, you know what, I'm going to lose my job. But if we speak with one voice, we come together. This is where, again, you know, when we talk about, you know, connecting as a team and collaborating as a team, it's not always vertical like that. Sometimes it has to be horizontal. If we start as a collective with our shared values, shared purpose, and our passion and our pain to be able to communicate better with our leaders, then that could help. That could be the starting point of that conversation. So I think it's all about coming together as a collective and realizing that these are our problems. Let's speak with one voice. And if you can find somebody, a leader within that group who can speak for everyone else, that's even better. But it all starts with a conversation.
Thank you so much, Doc. That's absolutely incredible. And just a follow-up question, you spoke about coming together, getting one voice to be able to address some problems. And I think earlier in your presentation, Dr. Alfred, hearing that only 19% of employees are truly engaged is actually a wake-up call for every leader. In environments where burnout, disconnection, disengagement, and quiet quitting have become so common, what do you believe leaders are still getting very wrong about cultures where people actually want to contribute, collaborate, and thrive? I know you touched on the collaboration, but where are leaders going wrong? If it's one thing that leaders are getting wrong, where is it?
Well, I'll share an analogy with you on this one. You want to think of yourself, think of the leaders as someone who's on the balcony. Are they taking time to come from the balcony onto the dance floor and really experiencing the energy and the experiences of people and where they are? Because of the targets, because of the pressure, people are saying, we need to deliver, we need to deliver. But in that high pressure is what creates, have you noticed that in most workplaces, whenever we are under high pressure, whenever there's a lot of change, there's a lot of uncertainty. Do you know what goes first? It's the culture initiatives. We drop them straight away. We drop the training. Said, we don't need coaching. We drop the coaching. We think it's a nice to have. So it all starts with the narrative. We think things like Ubuntu in the workplace, all for one and one for all. We think psychological safety. I actually had one leader who said to me, that's just the soft stuff. But if I'm not psychologically safe, I'm not going to speak up. So it all just starts with the narrative. Leaders just need to educate themselves, really learn how to deal with people, not being scared of people, but actually reaching out and talking to people one by one to understand where people are. And what bothers me the most, which I've actually seen, is that, imagine this. Here's an example. Sorry, I'm taking a bit longer here. Imagine you having, somebody who's just come back from maternity leave, right? A leader will say, we need to be productive. We have our targets. Somebody who's come back from maternity leave has got a newborn in their house. They're probably not sleeping. So when they show up and they give you 20% on that day, that 20% could be the 100% because they probably didn't sleep last night. But you won't know that if you're not talking to people. So leaders really need to come down to the level where people are, build the relationships, meaningful relationships, being curious to understand where people are, and then targeting your cultural initiatives to bring people in, to build together, to co-design that culture that you need. That's what I think needs to happen.
Thank you so much, Doc. I know we are out of time, but I think we're all loving the conversation. And just building on what you said, I do think that in a time where there's a lot of high pressure, targets are high, leaders and people forgo the people factor. And I love what you stand for, Ubuntu. You believe in themes like Ubuntu, human connection, collective success. And I can imagine that that's where you called in for interventions where organizations need to prioritize Ubuntu leadership, human connection, and collective success. So we're out of time, and unfortunately, I don't have any more questions for you. But if there's someone that has a question, that is a burning question that can't wait, please do raise your hand or kindly unmute your microphone, or you can pop it in the chat and we can read it quickly. And for those that still have time to engage with us for the last few minutes, we can absolutely do so. Going once? Okay, there we go. Paul's microphone is unmuted. Paul, go for it.
I just want to thank you very much, Alfred. It was a really, really good session. Appreciate it. All the best. We'll be in touch.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks so much, Paul. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. We hope that today's conversation leaves you reflecting not only on the work you do, but on the kind of workplace culture you are helping to create every single day. With that said, we've come to an end of our session, and we look forward to having you next week for another incredible session with another world-class speaker. Dr. Alfred, thank you once again for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you next week, Monday, 9 a.m. South African time, right here on Zoom. Thank you very much for tuning in. Bye, everyone.
Bye.